Chapter 1. The first thing I could feel was the dirt. It coated the inside of my mouth, a tough, bitter paste of sand and dead earth. I spat it out, making a pathetic, scraping sound in my throat, and forced my heavy eyelids open. Gray. The sky was just a heavy, suffocating gray mass pressing down on the dark, foamy water. It was a summer morning, technically. One of those ordinary, deceptive June days where you think it should be warm, but the cold still actively tries to murder you. The wind from the sea was wet and biting. It carried the sharp, rotting smell of seaweed and salt, sinking deep into my joints. It set down a shiver that I couldn't stop in my body. I tried to push myself up. The mud was thick, sucking aggressively at my bare legs, like it wanted to drag me under. My arms shook like dry twigs. They just gave out, and I collapsed back into the freezing slush. Something was very wrong. I reached inside of myself, searching for the roaring fire of magic that always slept right under my ribs. I expected a rush of heat, the spark of absolute authority. Instead came nothing. There was only a hollow, echoing void, an emptiness so deep it made my stomach violently twist. I looked down at my hands. They were pale, covered in mud, with blunt, perfectly ordinary nails. A terrifying numbness was creeping into my fingers and toes, a cheap feeling I've never had to experience before. My dress, once a regal red one, was now just a soaked rag dragging me down. Frantically, I ran my tongue over my teeth, waiting to feel the sharp, comforting edge of a predator. Instead, I found only flat, useless human enamel. Panic hit me. Not a magical, elegant fear, but a raw, living terror. I was human. I was entirely, pathetically fragile, and my jaw ached from chattering. I forced myself onto my hands and knees, fighting a wave of nausea. The gray waves slapped against the shore nearby, completely indifferent to my struggle. Standing still in this mist was just an invitation to freeze to death. I dragged myself away from the water. The ground was a nightmare of pine needles, sharp stones, and cold earth slicing into my bare feet. By the time I hit the hard asphalt of a road, I was leaving a trail of thin, watery drops behind me. Blood. Normal human blood. It didn't glow, it just washed away in the rain. A groaning local bus pulled up to a rusting metal sign nearby. Its doors hissed open, spitting out the sour smell of wet clothes and exhaust. I dragged myself up inside. My wet, bare feet were squeaking against the rubber floor. The driver, a tired man wrapped in a thick jacket, didn't even look at me. To him, I wasn't a monster or a queen. I was just a wet, miserable stray, bringing mud onto his transit line. I collapsed into a seat at the very back. The bus was claustrophobic. Foggy condensation dripped down the windows, and the air was suffocating, a disgusting mix of damp clothes, cheap detergent, and sheer human exhaustion. As the bus drove along the misty road, a new, sickening sensation twisted in my gut. It wasn't the clean thirst for life I was used to. It was a tormenting, acidic pain. Hunger. A basic animal craving for food that made my head spin and my hands shake. The bus dropped me off in the heart of the city. Narrow cobblestone streets, tall stone walls, and red medieval roofs faded into the fog. A glowing digital sign above a glass door cut through the gloom. 7:14 in the morning, plus 10 degrees Celsius, Tallinn. 10 degrees. It felt like a sick joke. I pushed the glass door open. The artificial heat inside hit me instantly, aggressively attacking my senses. It was thick with the heavy, greasy scent of melted butter, fried meat, and hot yeast. My stomach physically cramped. My mouth watered in a way that filled me with absolute disgust. My vision blurred. Logic and caution completely shut down under the crushing weight of my empty stomach. I walked straight to a heated glass case. My trembling fingers reached out to grab a warm meat pastry. "Hey, put that down!" a sharp voice snapped. A woman behind the counter glared at me. "You pay first." I turned to her, squaring my shoulders out of old habit. I tried to pull up my usual voice to one that used to make people freeze in fear. "I take what I want," I said. But it wasn't commanding. It was just a ragged, exhausted croak. A heavy hand clamped down on my shoulder. A security guard gripped my collarbone tight. His thick fingers dug into my skin. He pointed towards the door. Pure, blind fury flared in my chest. How dare he touch me? I locked my eyes onto his dull face and raised my hand. I gathered every ounce of my will, preparing to unleash a shockwave of red magic that would blast him right through the front window. I snapped my fingers. Click. Nothing. Just the dry, empty sound of human joints. The guard didn't even blink. With a disgusted grunt, he shoved me backwards. My weak, clumsy legs tangled instantly. I crashed through the swinging door, flying back and slamming hard onto the wet cobblestones outside. The pastry rolled out of my hand, landing perfectly in a puddle of dirty gray slush. I laid there on the wet stone. The freezing rain was hiding the tears of pure, humiliated frustration stinging my eyes. I looked at my scraped palms, with their skin torn and bleeding. We trick ourselves into believing that if our intentions are fierce enough, the fall won't hurt. But the pavement doesn't care who you used to be. It just waits for you to hit the ground. Eventually, the cold forced me to get up. My body moved on autopilot, dragging me up through the winding, steep streets until I reached a stone viewing platform overlooking the city. The wind up here was brutal, tearing at my messy, damp hair. A loud squawk echoed through the fog. A massive seagull landed on the stone railing right next to me. Its cold yellow eyes locked onto my face. It tilted its head and let out a sharp, demanding cry for food. I looked at the bird, and a hollow, tired laugh rattled in my chest. "I have nothing," I told it, holding out my empty, scratched hands. "See, I'm just like you now, looking for scraps in the rain." The seagull let out one last mocking scream, realized I was completely useless, and launched itself back into the wind, vanishing into the gray sky. I slid down against the rough stone, pulling my knees tight to my chest. The hunger has faded into a dull, heavy ache, replaced by a crushing exhaustion. I watched the city lights begin to turn on, tiny, distant sparks of warmth that I couldn't reach. I closed my eyes. The rain didn't feel like needles anymore. It felt like a soft blanket. I let my head drop back against the wet stone, ready to just let the darkness drag me to sleep. But as I sat there, The smell of the damp concrete and the shape of the cobblestones started to press into my brain. For a terrifying second, I thought I was back in the cage, trapped in the illusion where the archmages had created to break me, where I was nothing but a powerless human working in a fast food restaurant. But they hadn't invented that miserable purgatory from scratch to build my hell. They had taken a blueprint from the real world. I opened my eyes and stared through the iron railing at the city below. The sharp line of the coast, the winding curves of the streets, the rusted spires piercing the fog. A sickening wave of recognition crawled up my throat. I knew this place. I didn't just know it from a map or a simulation. My mind was anchored to these exact streets because I had walked them back when my power was an ocean. This was the very city where I used to cross over to cure my boredom, where I had played at being a goddess, tossing a miracle into the dirt just to see what a fragile human girl would do with it. And I knew exactly who lived here. The irony of it sat in my chest like a dead weight, to freeze to death in the very city where I used to play God. It was a joke so profoundly cruel and humiliating that it wrapped all the way around and hardened into pure anger. I ground my blunt human teeth together. I was not going to let the universe win the joke. I was not going to die like a scavenging bird on the pavement. I pressed my hands against the wet stone and pushed. My legs shook violently, protesting every microscopic movement as I dragged my ruined dress up from the ground. I didn't have my fangs, I didn't have my magic, but I knew the layout of these streets, and I remembered exactly whose door I was going to break down.